Hello, in this episode of Airs for Architecture, I spoke with the architect and writer Shayan Adham. I first encountered Shayan through his posts on Instagram and was intrigued by what I saw, so I made contact. And here we are.
Airs for Architecture, a podcast about architecture, buildings, urban culture and space.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Airs for Architecture. I'm talking today to Shayan Adham, architect, scholar, writer, designer. Shayan, I was introduced to your work by the architect Patrick Lynch, who sent me a link to your Instagram. And I was looking at it and I was quite inspired by it. And so I reached out and we've made contact and now we're doing this. But I think it would be great if you would be a real gentleman and introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Firstly, I'd like to express my thanks to Patrick Lynch for recommending me to you and to the A for the Architecture Podcast team for giving me the opportunity to connect with you. It's really a pleasure to speak with you, Ambrose. I'm Shayan Adham, the program director of Sarsar Institute and the co-editor of Sharsan magazine. And I founded my studio in 2020, named Layers Studio. To begin with, I was born in Rasht, a small city in the northern part of the Iran, near the Caspian Sea. It kind of have a Mediterranean climate. In Iran, architecture as a profession is not so welcomed for the families because of the low income, low earning, and the economical crisis that Iran always have. So anyone interested in buildings is often pushed to pursue civil engineer for a higher income, and so do am I. I went to civil engineering for one semester, and I cannot tolerate. So I, I go to architecture program at Gilan University, and with a lot of hopes, and then I face on a tragedy. Universities in Iran are not well equipped at all. I won't go into the detail, but they don't have any proper pedagogy or any comprehensive program for teaching architecture. So from the first semester, I realized that I had to learn architecture on my own, not from the university. So, and books, friends, and architectural competitions are the only means that I have to learn architecture. Due to the sanctions, we don't have any access to original books. So I should go to internet and search to find books from all other categories and vice versa. So I immerse myself with a lot of books and architects and don't have the particular order. They don't have any particular order. From magazines such as Oppositions, Perspecta, San Rocco, or architects such as Corbo, Venturi, Tafuri, Banham, Colin Rowe, Whitcover, Eisenman, Rossi, Moneo, Serlio, Alberti. It is all complicated, and I don't have any exact order to learn architecture from this figure or that figure. So I open up myself to the history of architecture altogether. In 2021, I became a lecturer for history and theory of architecture at the Contemporary Architectural Association of Iran under the direction of Yasser Musapur. And I also now worked with Iman Shafi and Arzu Jalal as the program director of Sarsar Institute for Architecture and Urban Studies. And I also teach a design studio called Parallel Life with Sahba Mansour and Iman Shafi now. I think it is kind of my introduction for your podcast. Yeah.
That's a pretty amazing story. I have students who are from Persia and from Iran, and I am sort of amazed by their approach to architecture, which is very distinct. I don't know if it's Persian because I don't know, but it feels very distinct to me, very kind of, as I've found in your work, a sort of critical perspective in relation to architecture, which is at once modern and also deeply rooted in a kind of sense of being Iranian. And I was just looking, as you were talking, I was looking at this university that you mentioned that you went to, of Guilan, is it pronounced?
Yeah, Gilan,
Guilan.
Guilan. This is the university that that is in Rash, in where I was born.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
you were born so
yeah,
out on the Caspian Sea.
yeah, yeah.
It's an extraordinary place. I mean, what is it? What is it like?
It is kind of like Japanese cities against the you know uh, every European people, any European people think Iran as a central courtyard, uh, some hot climate. You see the Yazd or Isfahan as a
Yeah.
cities which is they are so much. There's so much hot climate and other things, but in Rash, it have some Mediterranean vibe and a lot of rain, gable roofs in the city, and
Mm.
yeah, and it's quite different from the way Iran have been exhibited in the countries of the West, as
Yeah,
I
well, I mean,
mentioned.
just if you look on Google Earth, you just
Yeah,
notice that there's this mountain range that runs down along the side of the Caspian
yeah.
Sea and
Alborz. It is Alborz, yeah. Mountain range of Alborz. It
I
is the name.
see.
Yeah.
And beyond that, to the coastal side of that range,
Yeah.
it's just green, whereas
Yeah.
the rest of
Yeah.
Iran shows as a light brown color. So
Yeah.
it's a very wet place, I assume.
Yes, yes. It is kind of like London weather because it has a lot of rain and also humidity
Yeah.
because it is in the near of the Caspian Sea.
You've mentioned how you are sort of self-taught and qualifies, I suppose, something of an autodidact. Did you qualify as an architect through this process? Were you learning in architecture alongside doing this kind of self-directed study? And
Yes,
how did that work in relation to your own project? I guess what I'm trying to understand is what is the canon in Iran in terms of architecture?
mm,
What do you
mhm,
and
mm.
I suppose how did this contrast?
Yeah. Uh, I think Iran, after the revolution, 1979, all the programs of the architecture school have been homogenized. Before that, each school has different vibes.
Mhm.
Some universities like Tehran University have Buzar kind of program, or uh, El Mosanat, another university, have some techno fetishism in their university. Or in another university, Beheshti, some vibe up Ludovico Cuaroni and the humanistic approach to architecture. There are different kind of university with different approach. But after 1979 revolution in Iran, it became flat. Every university have to teach something particular that is like engineering, not architecture. It is and you get a degree of engineer of architecture, not architecture. And so you learn basics of drawings, and then you learn details, some ordinary details, and just two or three courses about history of architecture or theory of architecture, and they are not quite contemporary, or it is awful, I can say. Yeah. I can't be honest anymore, but yeah, these universities are awful. Uh, and you can't learn from them anything. Just draw, just the conventional drawing that you have to. There are now paperless digital architecture. They use hand and the board and the wooden board and ruler to draw plan or axonometric or anything, and it is quite that.
But it's not an arts degree. It's much more like a
Yeah.
technical degree.
Yes, yes, sure.
I
All the
see.
universities, yeah.
So with your self-directed study that went alongside that, how did you integrate that into your work in a way that was, I guess, acceptable to your tutors and to the system at
Mm.
large? I mean, did people encourage it?
No, no, at all. Not at all. I have two divergent. career for myself. One is about university and doing all those things that they would like, and I don't believe on them at all. And the other is myself and the competition that I enrolled in through the university. From the second semester,
Hmm.
I started to doing competition, architectural competition, from different views, and different programs such as a school, houses, and anything else. And this way is different from the way that university wants or like to be. You
Mm.
know, yeah, they're divergent.
I see.
Yeah.
This is a very interesting. No, it's a very interesting idea. I quite like that. I quite like that. I suspect there's a little bit of a, in a way, a similarity, but inverted in the UK, where architecture schools
Mm-hmm.
are held in high esteem,
Mm-hmm.
but the education that we deliver is somehow seen as lacking technical and professional
Yeah.
relevance to
Yeah.
actually making architecture.
Yeah.
So we get this criticism from the other direction, that is that we're too artistic or we're
Yeah.
too removed.
Yeah.
How have you managed to bring these two things? Do you manage to bring these two things together? And do you find your technical background actually, in a way, is quite useful in the end?
Uh, this is a tough question because I think yes, somehow, but I don't believe in their kind of aesthetic. You know,
Hmm.
their aesthetic is so much different from the way the contemporary architectural project in Europe, in America, in Japan are going to be. You know,
Mm.
I just learned from them the basics of drawing, details, or some kind of this, not the aesthetic or how to bring order into the plan. I learned from Louis Kahn, you know, the order of the plan. You know, I learned typology from Aldo Rossi. You know, I learned from the Manfredo Tafuri the system of the production and how the system of the economic change and influence the projects. You know, I learned from Peter Eisenman, The Formal Basis of Modern Architecture, Lateness, Ten Canonical. These books helped me to understand how to read a plan, you know. And I don't learn these things from university, you know.
That's very interesting. I think this is a wonderful warning for people
Mm.
over here.
Yeah.
So over the last couple of days, I've been up in a city in Scotland called Glasgow. It's a fine
Hmm.
city.
Yeah.
Used to be an enormous city. Is much smaller in the post-industrial period, and it's very kind of very decayed in many places. It's got very beautiful parts and very wealthy parts, and
Yeah.
then it's got a lot of decay, and there's all of this kind of architecture that's going up that is technical. You know, it's like
Yes.
office blocks, commercial buildings. And I was thinking about how even in our context now,
Mm.
the technical side of architecture has become almost the only way that architecture
Mm.
can be imagined.
Mm.
And I think I've said this on previous episodes. I'm not even sure if it's architecture anymore. But anyway, we
Mm.
can leave that aside.
But I think we should have a put an eye on the other side too, because on some level, as I have interviewed with Francisco Gonzalez de Canales, the man who wrote The Mannerist Mind. I don't know whether you read it or not,
No,
but
no.
he said about the influence of Tony Freton and Sergison Bates and Patrick Lynch about the counter attack to parametricism in London Olympics. And I think we should put an eye on the other side of the architect that become the art for art per se. It is dangerous too. I think we should balance between the technical side and the art side of the architect, and we should walk on the edge of these two kind of discipline that shaping the building today. Yeah.
This is really good and an unexpected conversation. So, how would you go about defining this quality of contemporary architecture? I mean,
Mm,
I
yeah.
guess where I'm getting to in my own thinking is that the more of it that I see, the further and further away from
Mm,
a sense of the designer the
Mm-hmm.
designer as a voice in this. It's sort of mediated.
Mm-hmm.
That vision is mediated by technology, by
Yeah.
policy, principally. And architecture becomes an exercise in satisfying these abstract, bureaucratic processes. And if you do that well,
Mm,
you are a good architect. And even our
mm,
professional definition has more and more become tied, I think, to satisfaction of technical and political and policy procedures rather than,
mm,
I guess, what the parametricists are trying to do is be artful and be free.
mm. I don't think so.
No?
At first, yeah. I think Parmesan is, as I've mentioned, is the techno fetishism. They use there is a dialogue between Mark Foster Gage and Michael Meredith on low res and high res in Log magazine, and they talk about the low resolution architecture and high resolution architecture. High resolution as parametrism or object oriented ontology, or in architecture, like the project from Tom Whitcomb and other things. And low res is the side of the Michael Meredith. Michael Meredith talk about the low res as something more negotiating between the contexts. And he established an exhibition called 44 Low Resolution Houses and gather all architects from Europe and America, like Office Gears, Van David Severn, I think, on a Holtrop projects, or Nemesis Studio, and all other project, and talk and show a different kind of architecture. A kind of architecture that in the first glance you didn't see any something spectacular or something extraordinary. But as you move towards it, as you read its plan, as you um, as you become more familiar with how it has designed, you know what architecture should be. And I am on this side of
Mm,
architecture. Yeah, not the low high resolution
no.
architecture where, and also I think in Europe you have in 2008 an economical crisis that changed all yeah, and that changed the way architecture should be. Pierre Chabart, in his famous essay Utilitas, Firmitas and Venustas in log 43, talk about this kind of architecture, that after the economical crisis architects cannot win the big competition and big project, cannot be in the big projects like Zaha Hadid or like other architects. And these younger architects try to overcome this tough situation in Europe and try to be more modest, but not modest in the way that architecture should only help people. Not that's all. But architecture as an humanitarian science, I think, as a place where elements of architecture uh, really connect their project to the history of the architecture. And I think I see in many of the offices that we can in the future we can talk about it.
I think that's a very interesting idea. Max Planck, I think it was, who said that science progresses one funeral at a time. And I have
Mm.
that feeling about architecture as well, is that we have these totemic figures, and I do enjoy their work. I mean,
Like who?
it's virtuosic. It's sort of like it's like Vladimir Ashkenazy on the piano playing Chopin. It's amazing,
Mm.
but I wouldn't want to live with it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's too much. It's amazing as a highlight, but I wouldn't want it all
Mm.
the time. In your own work, in the work that you present, certainly
Mm.
that I've seen through the your Instagram account, which is really rather wonderful. You
Thank
seem
you.
to me to be very interested in the idea of fragment. So this
Mm-hmm.
idea of bits of cities and bits of places and bits of buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Am I right in reading that?
Okay, sure. I try to just manage and talk about 5 points, not Corbusier's 5 point, but my 5 points on architecture. And I think it is valuable. I know the process of thinking about a project cannot be a recipe like cooking. Aldo Rossi, in his two influential books, The Architettura della Città and Scientific Autobiography, showed us that it is didactic, it is logical and objective in Architettura della Città, and the other is subjective, unconscious, and personal. Uh, Peter Eisenman wrote a piece that said, "Where history ends, memory begins." And I think these two books are two different kind of attitude towards architecture. But I try to really sum up 5 thoughts about architecture that they are in my mind that I can talk about them. The first one that you have mentioned, that you have some kind of vibe of Iranian architecture. I am cosmopolitanism. I don't believe in nationalism for architects. I am not an Iranian, or you are, and in my face, you are not an British or a Scottish architect. You are an architect. And I believe to non-Iranian architecture because I am an Iranian, so I should just manage to say this words. Uh, I try to escape from geographic oriented architecture. International media and competition and events such as World Architecture Festivals and all these competition try to show Iran with its traditional central courtyard houses with brick and walls and romantic vibes. But this is not the true face of the Iran. Many cities in Iran feature another aesthetic that I would describe as modernist one. We cannot escape from this kind of cities. We should embrace it and play within its logic. So I am against Orientalism for sure. Uh, the second point that I would like to mention is about geometric plan and section. Uh, it is important for me that against the it is kind of reactionary to parametricism and all these things, because in parametricism architecture you try to model a 3D project and then give some slices and then the plan and the section reveals. But I think my first encounter with the project is with plan or with section, because I think these are the most important and intrinsic to architectural project against the non-Euclidean architecture to control the space. I use this method to control the space of each project. We can see how beautifully architects such as Louis Kahn, Alvaro Siza, Venturi, Aldo Rossi use this feature. You see their plans, and they are all geometric. They use geometry to change the perspective of the person for sure. You know, the third point is elements of architecture. I believe in each elements of architecture: column, window, door, wall. They are all important, and each element has a history in its own that goes from that comes from Renaissance architects. We can see a line through all the history, and we can see a column that how it's changed with each architect that he can or she can use it. Uh, Many cities are not made from digital architecture, but from typology. They use elements of architecture with different juxtapositions that produce the building. And I think it is important to notice that the digital architecture try to dissolve all elements to a whole, to a complete whole, and you cannot figure out what is this glass. It is a window. It is a kind of different conception of architecture as a whole and architecture as a parts. And I am more to the parts, not to the whole. The fourth one is anyone have some different conception. We can say unnovel, uninteresting, as Andrew Atwood said, low res, as Michael Mezis said, and I can say everyday architecture. This concept connect the architectural project to the middle class, to a normal architecture, not the extraordinary architecture. Architecture become a background, as Christian Gears said, like the David Hockney's painting, The Pool. When someone get in the pool, you see the architecture as a background, as something that uh, life is the foreground of this kind of architecture against the Paramorphism, digital architecture, digital revolution, all those things.
Hmm.
Uh, the idea of type in this topic is more important too. Giulio Aragon, Aldo Rossi, Muratori, Anthony Wittler, Rafael Monod, each has different connotation for typology. But I think they all agree on that. As Monod wrote, questioning of typology is questioning of architecture itself. And typology is about the repetition, not about the uniqueness. And I think this kind of seeing architecture is about in the manner of everyday architecture help the concept of typology. And the fifth one, the last one, is architects are not genius or prophets that they do not go through a journey devoid of formal languages and references, whether architects acknowledge them or not. They are inherent in each project. Uh, in his influential book, The Anxiety of the Influence, Harold Bloom show how references work in modernist poetry. The modernist poets try to hide the references, try to say that I'm the genius and something come into the mind, and I try to draw these things that come into the mind. But I think references in architecture is truly important for an architect to know and to how to manipulate those references to produce another project. And I think it is important too. For example, uh, Aldross's Madonna Symmetry, Sant Cataldo, uh, traces its origin in Adalberto Libera's 1936 proposal for Central Plaza. You know, he's a great architect and used another architect project to bring a new project. Or you can also see in Le Corbusier's project to a tendency towards mannerism. Mannerism not as an insult, but as an attitude. As Colin Rowe have been beautifully wrote in Mannerist and Modernist. I think you have read it because Colin Rowe is your countryman, and yeah, I think yeah. He's a great writer,
Yeah,
and with his humor and
yeah, yeah.
with his kind of writing, they are wonderful. The Mathematics of Ideal Villa,
Hmm.
Mannerism and Modernism, and his influential book Collage City with Fred Coulter, they are amazing. They learn me how to see architecture. You know,
Hmm.
they teach me how to see architecture. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a really wonderful summary, and I love the Cheyenne's 5 points of architecture. I can see this. See this taking over the world as long as you don't become a megalomaniac. I wanted to just pick up on a couple of them.
Okay.
I liked this idea of the the architect as cosmopolitan, and I do agree with that. That naturally speaking, the nature of our discipline is inherently kind of globalized and universal. How does one then do this other thing that you plead for, you petition for, which is this idea of context and history? You sort of seem to be saying to
Mm.
me context and history,
Yeah.
but not in context and not in historical.
Okay. Sure.
So there's
I
a
will.
paradox here.
Yeah, there is a paradox, but I think the cosmopolitan, the context that I'm going to say is context of a site, not context as a general concept or general agenda. You know, you can talk about the context with its uh, irregular site plan for sure,
Mhm.
or with its economical problem that a project have, or with a budget, or with a problem of construction of that project. You know, there are contexts too. We just see context as something more big, like the climate change. You know, this is
Mm.
a big problem, but it is not just this kind of problem are the context-driven problem. You can just talk about the more a smaller and more modest problem that architecture can solve this, you know. And I think we should not put a lot of responsibilities on our shoulders and then we can say, okay, we are going to fix that problem. We cannot, you know. We are just some part of this bigger system in the architecture. And I think that you have mentioned the context. I'm going to say that the context as a smaller scope of the site, not the bigger one. And the history. It is important too. I think uh, I don't believe the word Western as a hegemony. Every person in Iran, with a lot of, I think, with a lot of um, I don't want to say that, but but he sees Western as a hegemony, as a place where all European cities talk and and think about one thing, about one kind of history. But I don't believe in that. Even in Renaissance architects, they have different attitude toward architecture. Serlio and Borromini, Bernini, and all those architects in Mannerism and Renaissance period, they have different kind of attitude to artists, and you can see it in their treatises that they have. Maybe they use same order of the column in each treatises, but they use different kind of drawings and different kind of proportion in each order of the column. So history for me is the flat, not that I am Iranian, so the Iranian architecture is more inferior or more superior to the Japanese architecture, to traditional Japanese architecture, or to a traditional American architecture, if America have traditional or something like that,
Of
because it is,
of
yeah,
course they
because
do.
yes, they have, but they are not American. They are indigenous people that have that tradition, not the one that Spain come to America and really removed all the indigenous people in the America. There is some short history and long history. I mean, we should not contradict them with each other. And for sum up, I would like to say that I think uh, these clues that I am an Iranian architecture, so I should the history of the Iranian architecture should be more familiar with me or more superior with me. It is more important to me. It is not at all. I see traditional architecture, for example, Safavid era in Esfahan has a tremendous and beautiful project like the Nash Jahan Plaza. I don't know whether you don't come here to Iran, you
I
know?
have I've wanted
Okay.
no. It's in my the three countries in the world I actually want to go to. I want to
You
go
would
to
be,
I want to go to Turkey, Iran, and Argentina. That's
ah,
it. I'm not that
yeah,
much in. Oh, and Japan, of course. But then
Japan, yeah,
yeah, of course. But
yeah.
maybe that's about it. I don't like airplanes very much. But anyway, it's
Mm.
But no one's ever invited me to Iran. And anyway,
We
people
would be
keep.
very happy to have you here.
I want to come back to this idea of context. I was reading something this morning about Colin St. John Wilson's and his wife, MJ Long, Mary Jane Long, British Library. And they were talking about the modernist project as something in which the program gained ascendance.
Mm-hmm,
And I think program and social context are perhaps interchangeable in what they're talking about.
mm-hmm,
But given that you're designing work in Iran, and Iran has this particular cultural, socio-political
mm-hmm,
character,
mm-hmm,
how do you design in a kind of way that is relevant to that culture?
mm-hmm,
And what role does architecture play in
mm-hmm.
your thinking, in
Yeah.
engaging with, and then I suppose transcending what
Mm-hmm.
you see as being the limitations and problems of that culture?
Mm. In your outlines that you have sent to me, you talked about critical practices in Iran
Hmm.
that are going to be emerged.
Hmm.
But I don't believe architects in Iran have a critical aspect in their work because we have two kind of architects in Iran. They mostly serve the government and developers with their shallow diagrams. They put some diagrams to uh, to fulfill their architects as role, and they do anything they want with their ideal diagrams. They are like Harvey Dent in Batman. With two with two faces. I used to be like that, but I'm not anymore. In the media, they have become pseudo intellectuals, discussing theories and histories of architecture, while being Frankfurtian leftist who claim to care for people and have critical aspects on culture of architecture. But in reality, they reveal another side, the side that does anything for dirty money. Why dirty money? Because the money they use to produce their project is connected to the government and all other things that I would don't want to talk about. They build building without any residents. They put 60, 40-story buildings in Tehran without any residents, just to maintain their value of the money that oligarchs have in Iran. You know, whether consciously or unconsciously, they try to keep both faces intact, the two faces, because each saves the other from disruption. In
Hmm.
summary, they are conformist. They're conformist in full term. In Iran, we need a Manfred Tafuri to dismantle their systems. This is an ethical critique. But now let's dive into the aesthetic one.
Hmm.
The aesthetic of architecture. At the aesthetic level, digital fetishism has become the main force behind creating a new, extraordinary, and spectacular building, often integrated with some nostalgic Orientalism. They knew how West want to see Iran as a nostalgic figure, like a novel, 1001 Nights novels, with, with some Arabic vibes and all
Oh
other
yeah,
things.
yeah.
Yeah.
It is a great
Uh,
book, by the way. It is a great book.
yeah, it's a great book. Yeah. And they use these to establish their position in the profession and academia. These two layers, digital fetishism and Orientalism, are interconnected and help to preserve their system in a Frederick Jamesonian way sense. These two systems, and they use and integrate with each other to maintain their role. However, nowadays there is a generational break in the culture of architecture in Iran. About 2 years ago, me and some of my colleagues, like Amir Najafi, Amir Javdan, Puriya Shawqi, and Ariza Khalatbari, did some lectures in universities called Non-Iranian Architecture and four other topics, and tried to critique the past generation because of their projects and their way they see architecture. You know, Step by step through lectures, magazine, events, projects, and more, this hegemony is being broken. Social media has had a great impact on this disruption too. Why they don't understand us or choose not to be, or choose not to, we understand them. We know how their system works, how they use representation to fulfill their role as an architect, and on the other side, how they use architecture to build more, save more money, and have more money and other things. And I think it is some kind of utopia, but like the Italian tendenza, the movement that have been in 1960s, I think, in Italia. I think Iran needs the discipline to be refounded, with different kind of attitude and different kind of thinking. And my friends and colleagues and I trying to do this, with writing, with lectures, with presentation, and with connecting with the contemporary architects all around the world. So if you ask me, what is the role of the architects in Iran is different from the past generation that uh, give you another answer.
Mm.
In our role today is like Boule, Ledo in the Enlightenment, or in 50s, 60s in America, where Venturi, Eisenman are and other have not any project or little project, and they obliged to teach in academia or draw projects without any clients.
Mm.
We are drawing a lot of projects without any clients, just to remember what is architecture should be. You know.
Yeah.
Uh, and social media plays an important role for us, for our contemporary generation, because It gives us a power to connect not with past generation in Iran, but with the contemporary architects all around the world. And you found me uh, through this social media.
Yeah.
It is important, but we should not forget the way Raphael Moneo, in his important essay, "The Solitude of the Building," have been said that the building is the most important medium or representation for architectural idea. We can see another representation in drawing or in in model or something like that. But Monod puts it very well. And also Manfredo Tafuri once said to Eisenman, I think, that you have nice ideas, but people take you seriously when you build something. And unfortunately, because I think, in my opinion, Manfredo without building is just as important as Peter with buildings.
I think I increasingly agree with you. I think there is, however, and this again comes back to something that Paddy Lynch and I have argued about, which
Yeah.
is this idea that writers who've never built are as a sounding gong, a clashing cymbal or a sounding gong. And I think it's one of the problems that we have in architectural education is that there are a lot of people teaching design who are not builders of buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And that there is a kind of embodied knowledge that comes from attempting to situate a real thing in a real place under the critical gaze of ordinary people and
Mm.
policymakers and your peers and planners and
Yeah.
general population. And my question comes back to this issue because, again, one of your 5 points, you talked about the image
Uh-huh.
and you talked about the object-oriented ontology and this idea of parametricism as an image-based building rather than, in a way, a scenographic tool which frames human action
Mm.
and I suppose makes social action more likely to occur. And
Mm.
yet we've got social media, and social media is entirely objectifying.
Yes.
How do you balance those two things out? How does the contemporary architect who has to use these platforms, these visual platforms, and you have magazines like Arc Daily and DZine who are essentially the same thing.
Yes. So.
Like how do we
Mm.
produce good architecture, communicate good architecture in
Mm.
that digital space?
I think reading history and theories from Renaissance till today can help us.
But not before.
Not before Renaissance, because Renaissance architects write.
Yeah.
Alberti wrote the first treatise,
Mhm.
but before that, Filarete, I think, wrote another book, but it is not a treatise. It's about the planning the castles, I think, Filarete. But I think, yeah, the writing and reading architecture texts can help us to know what is the good architecture,
Mhm.
and um, how to have a position in architecture. I think a lot of architects in today's era are conformists. They don't have any exact position. What is their kind of architecture, and what is their position to architecture? I think it is so much important. Uh,
Mhm.
for example, in this interview, I so much mentioned Manfredo Tafuri, but I would like to mention it another time. He wrote an important text, Dans la Boudoir, or the language of criticism, or the criticism of the language. It is an important essay about the system of the production and criticize Eisenman and five architects on their projects. But after that, Peter Eisenman, with different position, um, uh, took Manfredo Tafuri from Italia and um, uh, welcomed him in his institute, IAUS, Institute of Architecture and Urban Studies.
Mhm.
We have different position in architecture, and we can criticize each other, but we can have some respect and some welcomed hug with each other too. And I think it is beautiful. And I don't know whether this kind of relationship are nowadays is have been in the culture of architecture or not.
I think it has become more binary, perhaps.
Hmm.
And I think people are more scared to be critical. I mean, anytime anybody says anything controversial in architecture, they get smashed to pieces, which is a shame. But I wanted, Cheyenne, I wanted to finish with one last request, a question, I suppose.
I hope it is not a tough question.
No, it's not. It's just about this, your most recent Instagram post
Uh-huh.
was this, I think, rather extraordinary visual for a building you've designed called House Without View,
Yeah.
which has, and you've mentioned Eisenman already, it has
Mm-hmm.
some of these qualities of the speculative work of Eisenman in the early days.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that as a design project? What was it attempting
Mm.
to explore? And I suppose, and I try and do this as much as I can in this podcast, to kind of reach beyond the practice that you've done to kind of draw out of it
Mm-hmm.
what younger designers might find inspiring and I suppose informative or instructive in that.
Okay, but I don't think it is so much connected to Peter Eisenman. Again, I think it is much connected to some of the last project of John Hidak on the sanctuaries that Michael Hayes put a book. There is this long sanctuaries with a lot of elements added to it, like the La Tourette, La Tourette by Le Corbusier. There is a lot of a long elongated wall with a lot of needle-like column and needle-like uh, lightning that spear off into the form of the project. Um, this project, I I have a small, yeah. Just let me show. These small notebooks that I had, they are my friends, and in 2 or 3 years, I'm sketching all around plans, sections, different plans, sections with a lot of particularity. For example, at first I started the project with just one sentence, uh, that it is its title to a house without view, and I think about how can be a house without view but with light. And if you see the project in section, you can see that these dumb boxes are shifting in x direction, and bring light into the project, but without any view in each level. And this is the main problem that I have in this project, and it is an we can I don't want to say it is an visionary architecture, because I can say it is unbuilt architecture, or building with difficulty architecture, as Aldo Rossi puts it in the introduction for Boule books, and what other informs from this kind of project. I think I did this project for myself. Uh, I don't want to be being another person and thinking about what he will learn. I don't know. I don't want to use the word learn, but he will see in this project. But we can say the 5 points of that I've mentioned earlier are obvious in this project. You see the plan and section in a geometrical oriented kind of place, or you can see the elements of architecture have some different juxtaposition, as the columns are going to be slightly rotated in section, and all other things. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a great place to finish. And I've very much enjoyed hearing you discuss some of your work and your incredible knowledge about architecture.
Thank you so much, Ambrose. It is wonderful to talk with you.
Any authentic creation is a gift to the future, so said Albert Camus. And so it is implied in the work of Shayan. Please see the podcast description for links to his social professional profiles and follow him there. It's good stuff. And thanks for listening.